destroyed the wall of the city, destroyed the city, and left it in ruins. And the people of Judah, who are called the Jews, okay, the Jews were taken into captivity, into exile in Babylon. And this was in fulfillment with the prophets that prophesied. And Jeremiah particularly prophesied that they would be in exile for 70 years. And then the Lord would restore them. So unlike Israel, which was never to be recovered, Judah stayed in exile for 70 years. And the Lord had promised that he would restore his people back. And so after 70 years, they were brought back to Judah. So the exiles, remember, they were not in one city in Babylon. Babylon was a large empire that covered from India all the way to Egypt. And they were a big empire. So they were actually scattered. If you read Esther, you will have an idea of how spread the Israelites were in the kingdom of Babylon. But the Lord was committed to bring them back, to rebuild Israel, to rebuild Jerusalem as it were, and rebuild Judah. So the period of exile, 70 years passed, and in fulfillment with the promise of God, he raised Cyrus. Now Cyrus, if you read Isaiah, God promises that he will raise his servant Cyrus. Isaiah lived many years before the exile even took place. But that shows to you how God's prophecy is so precise and how it is fulfilled. And so, Syria became the powerful nation and conquered Babylon. And Cyrus was Persia became a powerful nation and conquered Babylon. And Cyrus was the king. And so Cyrus decreed that Jerusalem must be rebuilt, the people of Israel, the people of Judah must be turned back, to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the nation. Now you have a glimpse of this. Just turn to the historical book of Second Chronicles. In Second Chronicles chapter 36, you read something of this event taking place just at the end of that book. Second Chronicles chapter 36, reading from verse 20. Carried into exile to Babylon the remnant who escaped from the sword, and they became servants to him and his sons until the kingdom of Persia came to power. The land enjoyed its Sabbath rest. No, that is the land of Judah. It enjoyed its Sabbath rest for 70 years. All the time of its desolation, it rested until the 70 years were completed in fulfillment of the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm and to put it in writing. This is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says: "The Lord, the God of Israel, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him in Jerusalem, in Judah. Any one of his people among you, may the Lord his God be with you, and let him go up let him go up to uh, to to if you go to this if you go to Ezra chapter 1, that sentence continues because it's just a continuation. Ezra chapter 1 is just a continuation of the end of Second Chronicles. So it says, let him go up to Jerusalem in Judah and build the temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, the God who is in Jerusalem, and the people of any place where survivors may now be living are to provide him with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with free will offering for the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem. So there you are. Cyrus decrees that the people of Judah, the Jews from wherever they are in the kingdom of Babylon, now under Persian rule, must as it were return back. So this is where we find the book of Zachariah. Zachariah is now living in the period of history when the children of Israel have returned back to Judah. The repatriation of the Israelites was done in batches. Okay? They didn't come at one time. When King Cyrus conquered Babylon and decreed that the Jews must return, they were coming in groups. And the first group was under the leadership of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel was a descendant of David, and he was the governor, to be the governor of Judah, and to lead those that were coming to rebuild the temple of God and to rebuild the city of Jerusalem. And Joshua was the high priest. So this was the first batch that came. And the purpose and the decree of the king is that they may rebuild the temple. So these first people began to rebuild the temple of the Lord. They began by rebuilding the altar, and they laid the foundation of the temple. But the work was stalled. After Cyrus died, Zeus came into his son. Zeus took over, and Artaxerxes took over. And during the reign of Zeus and Artaxerxes, we find that in Nehemiah and Ezra, there was so much opposition, and the king put a halt to the construction of both the city and the temple. There was a fear. There were enemies around. If you read Nehemiah, you have names like Tobiah and the others who were really opposed. And they told the king that this city is known as a history of being powerful. And if you allow them to rebuild, it will be at your own loss. And so Zeus and Artaxerxes were, as it were, afraid. They put a halt, and the construction was halted for 15 to 18 years. Darius I, who we find is the king now when Zachariah is now the prophet, as we read in verse 1 of Zechariah, in the 8th month of the second year of Darius. Darius became the king of Persia. And he made a search and found that, yes, indeed, Cyrus had decreed, the king had decreed that the temple must be built. And therefore he gave the go-ahead for the temple and the city to be rebuilt. Okay? So, it is in this period now, in the time of Darius, that the Lord raises Zachariah, the prophet, and with a single purpose, to encourage these weak, discouraged exiles to be strong and to rebuild the temple. This is the historical context in which the book of Zachariah finds itself. You can imagine Jerusalem was not habited for 70 years. Now, unlike Samaria, remember in Samaria, when the Israelites, the northern king, was taken away, Assyrian king brought other people to inhabit, from other nations to inhabit. For Jerusalem, it was left to ruin. It was left uninhabited for 70 years. And therefore, the land knew what is called its Sabbath, its rest. Now you can imagine coming back to a nation, to a place, to a city, to a land that has been inhabited for 70 years. It is in total ruin. The temple was burnt, the city wall is destroyed, the houses were destroyed, graves were as it were destroyed. And these are weak people. It's like refugees. I remember when they were repatriating refugees back to Angola in those days. I was in Northwestern Province. A number of them said, where will we go? Where will you go? From Maeva. They opted, this is the country we've known. We were born here. Maybe that war took maybe 30 years or something. But people, some of them came very young, they are grown, and they don't know their village, but there was a government program to repatriate them. United Nations High Commission for Refugees had money to repatriate them. Now these people are coming to a land that has remained for 70 years. Those who were little children when they were taken are now 70 years old. Most of them were born in Babylon. And they come into this land and they face so much opposition from the enemies, who are trying everything possible to ensure that the city is not built again. So these are weak people, very vulnerable, discouraged people. Zerubbabel himself is a weak man. He feels he's under the authority of Darius. It's not like they were given the power to run, autonomy to run their own affairs. They were still under the rule of the Persians. And so they are really vulnerable people. And so what God does is he raises Zachariah and Haggai. These two prophets lived at the same time, they ministered at the same time, and their theme is the same: to encourage the people of God to be strong. So God sends these people to encourage these feeble, discouraged, to be courageous. And so because it is the Lord of hosts that has determined to establish his people. Okay, that is the historical context. Now, what are the key characteristics of, some of the key characteristics of the book of Zachariah? Now, the book of Zachariah is, if you've read the New Testament, you will find this book to be a very familiar book when you read it. But let me start from one of the very prominent characteristics of the book. It's the way the Lord presents himself in this book. He calls himself almost throughout as Yahweh Sabaoth. Yahweh Sabaoth. The Lord of hosts, Jehovah of hosts, Yahweh of hosts. My NIV translates that title as the Lord Almighty. Now, in the Old Testament, in the whole of the Old Testament, the word Lord Sabaoth is used 285 times. Yet this title is used in the book of Zachariah alone 55 times. That represents about 20% of the whole usage of the word, of the title, the Lord Sabaoth, is concentrated in the book of Zechariah. Now the name the Lord Sabaoth means, really, literally translated, means the Lord of armies, the Yahweh of armies. It is a name that says, like NIV says, is the Lord Almighty, is the commander-in-chief of the heavenly armies. He is a God who is got all the power and authority under his command. That is the name that the Lord uses in the book of Zechariah 55 times. He keeps repeating it. The part that we read in the opening verses there, you will see that it is the word that is coming again and again. In verse 3, tell the people, verse 3 of Zechariah chapter 1, tell the people, this is what Yahweh Sabaoth says. Return to me, declares Yahweh Sabaoth, and thou return to you, says Yahweh Sabaoth. And that is exactly how this book is written. The Lord presents himself as the Lord Almighty, as a great God, as a God of hosts. Now, it speaks of the supreme authority and power to defend his people, to protect his people, to, as it were, defeat the enemies that are opposed to them. And that's the point he wants the children of Judah to know. That it is Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord Almighty, who is in charge. He is the commander-in-chief of all the heavenly armies. Therefore, who can be against you? So when they speak, when Zechariah speaks, and he speaks to the Zerubbabel and says, be strong, O Zerubbabel, he says it's because the one that speaks to you is Yahweh Sabaoth. God chose to present himself to these weak and vulnerable people who were discouraged and they had no resources in themselves, by this name, to remind them that he was their resource. It was him who had all the power and mighty that they needed. And because he had declared and determined, the work would succeed. And it was guaranteed. Zechariah chapter 4, verse 6 to 10. Quickly, just let me read that. So he said to me, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, not by mighty, nor by power, but by my spirit, says before them.